The new era of the DC universe is here, at least in the film landscape. James Gunn has asked for assistance, and here we are to help. Episode 134 of the Byword begins now. Welcome into the Nerd by Word, the only podcast that is steeped enough in DC lore, at least Dave is, to help James Gunn and Peter Safran as they build this new connected universe in film. On today's show, we're going to be giving the phase one, if you will, of the new DC universe. We're doing a hard reset as we move forward into the future. But first, it's time for... All right, Dave, this is a very apropos news story for today's episode.
Yeah, so obviously, at time of this recording, a whole bunch of news has broken, leaks, if you will, from behind the scenes, leading up to what is going to be the unveiling of James Gunn and Peter Safran's plan for the DCEU. And a lot of the leaks are focused on things we are not getting. Some of the leaks may be accurate, others may not. James Gunn has taken to Twitter to state as much that not everything that is being reported right now is accurate. However, there is one nugget in all of this that seems to be true, and we're getting additional reporting as of this recording right now that seems to indicate that this is in fact accurate, and that is that Wonder Woman 3 is not going to be moving forward, at the very least, with writer-director Patty Jenkins. The initial report indicated that the movie was simply canceled, that Warner decided not to move forward with it because it did not fit with the still in development plans for a new cinematic universe based on DC Comics. But now additional information has been released, and it appears that what actually happened is that Patty Jenkins apparently either submitted a treatment or a draft script. There's some disagreement on there. And that the studio had notes on how to make the movie work with the new sort of larger universe that is being put together here, and that Jenkins apparently decided, rather than rewriting the movie and making it fit with those plans, she decided to reject the studio notes and walk away from the project. So whether there will be a Wonder Woman 3 at this point, moving forward with Gal Gadot and continuing that story, is in question. Gal, of course, is close friends with Patty Jenkins. There's a chance that she will walk away from any Wonder Woman 3 that does not involve her. And so that could put the kibosh on a third movie in that particular franchise and may require a reset for the Wonder Woman character moving forward. So it's an interesting situation too, because you're seeing all sorts of leaks now, some rather humorous and very obviously fake, some maybe credible, of what Wonder Woman 3 might have actually looked like. A lot of indication is that there was going to be another sort of tying in knots to bring Steve Trevor back yet again for a third outing, which to be completely honest, seems unnecessary to me. So if that is the case, then I probably would have had some notes too if I were the studio. But there is obviously a lot of table setting going on and a lot of rearranging of chairs as James Gunn and Peter Safran are taking over here. And although there seems to be some indication that they're not willing to completely reboot, but are interested in taking sort of what's best of the old DC Extended Universe, and try to move forward with that, which arguably could include, Henry Cavill and Gal Gadot and, various other actors not, playing the Flash. that there is some possibility for some of the actors perhaps to move forward. However, there is definitely a behind the scenes creative direction change. And it seems like not everybody's going to be on board with those changes. So, Kris, I'm interested to hear your take on this.
There's a Hollywood Reporter article that had some interesting rumblings and rumors. But for me, I'm just, this is contrary to the age of fandom and social media. I'm going to sit back, just take a collective deep breath, and just wait and see till we actually hear official word. I've never been one for like giving too much credence for rumors and whatever to these quote unquote industry insiders. Until I see the official announcements from the official pages, then I'll wait for that. James Gunn himself went to Twitter and said some of it's true, some of it's absolutely not true, and some of it's a little bit true and a little bit untrue, some of it's in between. So one of the big kerfuffles amongst fans is that it has been reported, or at least rumored, that a Michael Keaton-led Batman Beyond film is one of the casualties. And I'm really of two minds. I mean, is that a movie I'd like to see? Yes, of course. But if it is a collateral damage casualty of resetting this universe and moving forward in a cohesive direction, then so be it. The animated series that we all love is still there. So I'm just gonna wait and see until we get official word, and I'm not gonna hyperventilate.
And I think that's probably a fair approach to take to some of this reporting. A lot of it looks like hyperbole right now, and there is a lot of indication that some of this stuff may be inaccurate. There's a lot of reporting going on that Henry Cavill, for example, is now not returning as Superman after all. And I find, not that that's impossible, it's certainly possible. There's always things shifting behind the scenes. But Cavill, very publicly now walked away from The Witcher, a franchise which he apparently likes a great deal. And I find it difficult to believe that he would walk away from that particular steady paycheck without having a contract already in place to return as Superman, if that's indeed the reason why he decided to leave. So there are a lot of things that I am not, I'm still very dubious on some of the rumors coming out. And the speculation on social media is absolutely through the roof at this point, and really just borderline, as you said, like people are hyperventilating at this point. And I'm really not interested in going into full panic mode at this point. I'm really just very curious what kind of plan they're putting together for the DC universe. More on our take on that, obviously, in just a little bit. But I'm curious. Like, there's definitely something going on behind the scenes, but I don't think we're going to be privy to what that is for quite a while yet. All right, Kris, what is your news story for this week? What you got?
Well, we were recently treated to the Game Awards, most of which I tuned out of because it was a Sony love fest. But one of the cool reveals that we got was a trailer for Hellboy Web of Weird. It's a new roguelite action adventure game set in the universe of Mike Mignola's Supernatural comic series. And it looks really interesting. One of the notable shakeups is the change in voice actor. Lance Reddick is going to be performing as Hellboy. He was famously portrayed by Ron Perlman in both of the feature films. And really excited about this. It seems like a comic book come to life, and it seems really kind of faithful in its adaptation. I'm not as well versed in the Hellboy universe. I haven't read any of the comics, but I watched the first film and really, really enjoyed it. So what are your thoughts on this, Dave?
I think it actually looks like a fun little game, and I'm always in when it comes to adaptations of comic books into video games, much more so than adaptations of comic book based movies into video games, if you get my meaning here. I think that when they go directly to the source material to create a video game, it's usually much more interesting than when they try to do something with, an adaptation and then basically adapt an adaptation. There's just always something weird going on there. Hence, the legendary licensed movie video games are awful. reputation that, they have gotten in many cases very deservedly. But when you look at stuff like, the Arkham video games, or, the most recent Spider-Man video games, those sorts of things, when they go kind of to the comic books for inspiration and then kind of adapt into their own direction, much more interesting to me. And Hellboy is such a cool franchise. I've read a little bit. It is a very, very sprawling, quote-unquote, universe at this point, and kind of difficult to get caught up on. But what I have read is so very distinctive and cool that I definitely want to read more, and I totally can see how this would work as a video game.
Yeah, the art style, I'm not sure who did the art on the few Witcher comics that I've read, but it looks very similar aesthetically to the Witcher comics, which I greatly enjoyed.
Yeah, the art style, the Mignola art, Mike Mignola's art style is so distinctive anyways, right? So Hellboy has its very own vibe. I mean, you can look at any Hellboy comic book, and even before you see the title character, you know exactly what you're getting into. So if they're really riffing off of that as their art style for the video game, that's just fascinating to me. I'm really into that.
All right, that wraps up our nerd news segment. When we return from this, our first break, the Byword Big Talk comes back with our Phase 1 of the DC Universe. Welcome back for this week's Byword. And when the news of James Gunn and Peter Safran taking over as co-heads of the DC film universe, Gunn put out a tweet asking and soliciting for advice, things that fans wanted to see. So we're taking him up on that offer, and we are coming up with a full-fledged Phase 1 of what we want to see in this film universe. We're going to volley it back and forth from one film to another. Dave, you got dibs. What is the first film that you want to see in the new DCU?
Okay, so before we go into this, I think we're going to have to set a couple of ground rules that are extremely important to understand some of the things that you and I are going to do here with these movies that we want to see. The first thing that I think we're going to have to establish is, at least as far as we're concerned, and we texted about this yesterday, is that the very first movie in our particular DC cinematic universe is the Batman. I think that Matt Reeves' the Batman should be the Batman for the next DC cinematic universe. And before a whole bunch of people howl, both fans and detractors of the movie, let me go ahead and address the elephant in the room. How many Batmen do we need at this point? You know, we've had Affleck, we've had the return of Keaton, which is going to be in the upcoming Flash movie, and we have Robert Pattinson's Batman. I mean, how many Batmen do we need? Do we really need to recast again? I think there's a very elegant way to integrate that version of Batman into a DC universe without stepping on Reeves' toes. And that's just saying that the Reeves Batman movies are about his early career. And then you can go ahead and say that the rest of the DC universe is sort of a flash forward when he, opens up to a larger world and joins the Justice League and all that stuff. And so Matt Reeves can still play in his own little corner, but we also have the opportunity to have the same actor playing Batman just as an older version of himself, let's say 5 or 10 years down the line or whatever you want to do. And I think that would work extremely well in us not having to reestablish another Batman yet again. The second thing that I think is definitely a ground rule here, and we talked about this a little bit before recording, is that there's a big difference between Marvel and DC, in that Marvel uses this sliding time scale in its comic books as a way of keeping its characters, quote unquote, young and fresh. And DC does that to a little bit of an extent, but much more something that DC has done over the years is rely on legacy, on the idea that characters grow up, they develop, the Teen Titans grow up and become Titans, Robin becomes Nightwing, Kid Flash becomes the actual Flash, people grow and develop, and there is a sense of legacy, of mantles being passed along. And that is something that we're going to have to establish in a cinematic universe as well. Simply that this is a universe that is lived in. Just because we make a Flash movie doesn't necessarily mean it's about the very first Flash, and we need to have this, extensive origin story. It is okay to say that there were previous superheroes in this world. It is okay to have a JSA that operated during the 40s and 50s. that opens up additional story possibilities and kind of divorces us a little bit from having to make every movie an origin story. Let's just go ahead and say this is a lived-in world, akin to something like Star Wars, quote unquote, A New Hope, right? The original Star Wars movie dumped us into the middle, right? And we can argue about how good the prequels were, but it was always a lived-in universe. And I think any DC cinematic universe needs to be lived in as well. Do you have anything to add to that, Kris?
Yeah, I said this before recording, but it is a bit exhaustive, for multiple iterations, multiple even Marvel, DC, what have you, of watering down the source material to make it quote unquote palatable to the general audience. I think it's a little bit of a slap in the face to fans, and even to general consumers and casual fans, because in the advent of Google and Wikipedia and a number of internet resources that you can go and research the source material and do a quick deep dive into something. We don't have to distill everything to its most based elements, and we don't have to make everything an origin story. So I'm a big proponent of making a lived-in universe.
Yeah, fantastic. So, obviously, if we're going to talk about the first movie on any DC cinematic universe slate, for me, we have to begin, of course, with Superman. And again, here we are in this situation where we're not even sure, is Henry Cavill returning? Is he not returning? Are we starting over? I'm perfectly fine with the notion of Henry Cavill returning and kind of doing a soft reboot on the character, where we're just basically saying, look, this is how he is now. And Man of Steel and all that, take it or leave it. Let's just move forward. I'm perfectly fine with that. Cavill in the role is great, and I think he deserves a really good Superman movie. And so if we're going to make a Superman movie, I know I've heard a lot of different stuff bandied about, stuff we need to do with Superman. I know a lot of people online are talking about a title of Man of Tomorrow to kind of go along with Man of Steel. There was also a recent, animated film called Man of Tomorrow, and so some people are like, well, just like that animated movie, we should bring in the Parasite as a villain, or Mongol as a villain, or this or that. And I think it's much easier to reestablish Superman and who he is, to go with a story that did exactly that, reestablished Superman in the comic books and reestablished what he stands for. And that is Action Comics number 775, commonly known as What is So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way. I proposed using this as a jumping on point for a movie. We could make it simple and call it Superman, Truth, and Justice. The plot of the comic book is basically that there is a new team of superpowered vigilantes. They call themselves the Elite. They are led by a powerful telekinetic. His name is Manchester Black. And they are going around and like brutally dealing with criminals and killing people, executing them. And they get a massive approval from the public for their violent tendencies towards criminals. And it kind of causes Superman to take a step back and do some navel gazing. And it's like, am I still, of the times, is how my approach still the right approach? Is, am I still, with the times, or is this new generation, do they have the right idea? And so he has to kind of deal with, what does he do about these people? Is he going to let them, do their thing and fight crime in their own way? Or is he going to oppose them and stop them? And of course, we get an absolutely fantastic throwdown where Superman single-handedly has to go through the entire Elite, which are not, they're not shabby. They really do give him one heck of a fight. He ends up pretty battered by the end of it. And he has to reestablish that, yes, he stands for truth and justice, and he is going to continue being that, even if those values are quote-unquote old-fashioned. In a lot of ways, the comic book looks directly at the reader and says, this was back in 2001, and says, all these extreme, 90s comics you're into, and all these extreme characters that run around and execute people, they're not better than Superman. That Superman is still the moral center of DC Comics and should be. And I think that is the perfect story to do on the big screen to establish that this is, in a lot of ways, an old-fashioned but still relevant and timely Superman that we're going to get in this new DC cinematic universe. What say you, Kris?
You see, this is really funny because I thought you were talking about the recent comic book series, Superman Truth and Justice. But I think that just kind of alludes to the timelessness of it. So, yeah, I'm a big proponent of this. And I think it's a welcome kind of ethos to kind of put out there and kind of put our, stamp your flag in the ground and kind of make that statement. So I immediately think, of course, of something like Superman Smashes a Klan, of like a timeless kind of ethos that really kind of rings true no matter where you're at.
And I do think it doesn't, it shouldn't be a one-to-one adaptation, obviously, much like, for example, some of the Captain America movies, they adapted certain storylines, but they also riffed on them and changed them to make them feel, different and fresh. I think there are things to do with this. There was a Superman versus the Elite animated movie a while back. I seem to recall that adapted the story as well. There are things you can do with the story to play with, to expand it a little bit. It is, of course, sort of a oversized single issue of a comic book. And you can play around with that a little bit. But what I like most about it also, it's not an origin story, but it still speaks to the essence of the character. So you're able to establish Superman without establishing Superman, if you get my meaning. And I think that's really the perfect jumping on point for a new DC cinematic universe.
I'll piggyback that by saying that I think Gunn even said this, that Superman is like the most important thing to get right. So that gives me hope, pun fully intended.
I totally agree. He's such an important character and such an essence of what DC stands for. And I hope they get him right here. All right, Kris, I'm not surprised that this is your go-to second movie for our new cinematic universe. So deliver what you got.
All right. So as our fans know, that I am a mostly Marvel consumer, and the extent of my DC reading knowledge is almost exclusively the homework that you've given me, which it's high time we had another homework episode, friendo. But so I'm coming with recommendations, kind of coasting on vibes, and then I'll, maybe kick it to you for your encyclopedic knowledge. But I really want like an Amazon centric film. So I don't know of a specific run or whatever. I think you've got one in mind. I think for me, one of the things that left me a bit uncomfortable with the first Wonder Woman film, as well received as it was for the most part, is how quickly we just kind of brushed past, the Amazons and that entire world. And I was thinking something along the lines of like Eternals, where we're kind of embedded in that, and just there's so much content there that is ripe to mine and let it breathe, and we don't have to rush into man's world. Give us Nubia, give us all of the different Amazons and their different personalities, and just kind of let that sit and stew and let it breathe. And that's what I want. I want a full-fledged just Amazons of Themyscira without no men necessary, especially Steve Trevor.
I see. I really like this idea. I do think that if you are willing to continue with Gal Gadot in the role, that you technically don't need another Wonder Woman movie right away. You can go ahead and punt back and do an Amazons movie kind of focused on Themyscira. And, there are things, even Wonder Woman movies, Wonder Woman comic books, that are Themyscira focused that you could probably do. I'm thinking of something like The Circle. I think that was Gail Simone. That one's really, really good for something that's like involves like, hidden truths on Themyscira and what's going on there. There's some good stuff there. And obviously a lot of the current output focused on Themyscira is really good as well. The Amazons have a very long and storied history, and there's all sorts of really cool storylines. I even think it would be fair to go back to some of the George Perez stuff from post-Crisis on Infinite Earths that sort of reestablished Wonder Woman and kind of rewrote her lore. I think there's a lot of cool Amazon stuff in there as well. However, I will also say that if we're going to go ahead and do a new Wonder Woman movie, That's just completely straight up Wonder Woman and has to establish a new Wonder Woman. I put in our notes here that I think Greg Ruckus, Hikataya, I'm very, very bad at pronouncing stuff. I'm working on that. That particular comic would be absolutely fantastic. This was it was Rucka's first Wonder Woman story, if I remember correctly, and this was prior to him taking over the book and having a really fantastic run on the character that I think should serve as a lot of inspiration moving forward. I particularly like how he established her as a ambassador. So she's basically almost like a political figure, an ambassador from Themyscira, who's has to deal with the U.S. government and the UN and all these things. There's really cool stuff that came out of that. But the particular story I'm referring to is really the anti-Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, and I know that sounds harsh, but it is true. I think Batman v Superman in a lot of ways should have focused a lot more on the philosophical differences between Batman and Superman rather than manufacturing extended action set pieces without any heft behind them. And this is the exact opposite of that, in that there isn't a lot of action set pieces. It's a short story, so you can probably weave a B plot in there and have a proper villain and a good beatdown, as a climax if that's what you wanted. But the underlying idea here is very simple. It's a Greek tragedy, basically, and it focuses on notions of like duty and vengeance. Wonder Woman does this ritual, the Hecate, where she's honor bound to eternally protect a woman by the name of Danielle Wells. Oh, God, it's been a while since I read this thing. But basically, Danielle killed a sex trafficker, drug dealer who murdered her sister. And Batman is basically looking for Danielle and wants to take her in. And so what you end up with is, Wonder Woman's sense of duty and of protecting the oppressed goes up against Batman's need for justice. And they have basically what I like to refer to as a philosophical throwdown, because these two characters are not very well matched power level wise. And it's really a no-win situation for Wonder Woman. Does she break her oath? Does she turn her back on justice? Like, how does she deal with Batman, who keeps knocking at the door for embassy, so to speak, really her window? And that is, I think, a really cool story to use as sort of a first meeting between Batman and Wonder Woman on the big screen in this new cinematic universe, because you right away establish how they are similar and how they are different, and it doesn't end really with the two beating the snot out of each other, if you know what I mean. In fact, Batman has some of his best moments in that story because he so understands, like, Diana's culture, that he even he even does some really cool stuff in there that basically, quote unquote, ingratiate himself to her by respecting her culture. And it's a very, very cool story. So I think an Amazon's movie would be fantastic. I think we need to go to Themyscira and really revel in that culture. But if we have to reestablish a new Wonder Woman, I think this particular story would be really, really cool as a new standalone Wonder Woman movie. Something very, very different from what we've seen so far.
Okay, now I'm obsessed with seeing Pattinson do that. I have to have it. My God.
I just want to see that scene of Wonder Woman's boot on Batman's head, like in live action. If you look at the cover of the graphic novel, it's like Batman's on the ground and Wonder Woman's boot is just on his face, and it's such a striking image, because there's just no way Batman can take her, and at the same time he's willing to, for justice, stand there and say, listen, I don't care how powerful you are, you're wrong. It's a really, really cool story. Rucka did some fantastic work on Wonder Woman.
All right, Dave, this is now quickly becoming your calling card, but I don't care. I'll call that number all day, every day.
Yeah, so I talked about this, I believe, last episode with our comic book pitches. But, the Martian Manhunter has been sort of replaced, quote unquote, by other characters in sort of the Big Seven lineup of the Justice League in recent years. And I think that is such a shame, because I think that, Martian Manhunter is such a great character. And in our last episode, which, if you haven't listened to, dear loyal listener, you really should go back and listen to, because we are delivering some comic book pitches that are pitch perfect, if you appreciate this little pun. But one of my pitches was that I would love to do a 1940s, 1950s set sort of film noir inspired take on the Martian Manhunter, where he's investigating he's a PI and he's investigating some potential like alien incursions on Earth. And he's trying to figure out, what these aliens are up to. And it kind of plays with, paranoia and the notion of McCarthyism and all that a little bit. But in the context of a cinematic universe, I think it would be interesting to do that kind of movie and kind of seed sort of in the background the JSA. So we know that, there's news reports of like these superheroes, there's a Flash, there's a Green Lantern, and we kind of get this sense that, as I've mentioned before, this is a lived in universe. Plus, and I want to get back to this at the end of our big talk today, there is a very, very cool place we can take this if we're leading up to a new Justice League movie, where we can lay some important seeds for the Justice League movie right here in this 1950s Martian Manhunter flick. And I'll talk more about that, but I think it's important to have kind of what they tried to do, I think, in a little bit with Wonder Woman, but didn't really capitalize on in the DCEU, which is that you have a long-lived character who's been around, forever, and you can use that character as an in to some of the past of the DC universe. I think the Martian Manhunter is perfect for that kind of thing. Saying he's been on Earth for a long time, he's been hiding among us, using his shape-shifting abilities. He's a natural in to see the past of the DC universe. And also a character that is long-lived enough that we can then very easily bring him into the future Justice League. So I think a Manhunter from Mars movie, and that's what I would call it. I wouldn't even call it Martian Manhunter. Manhunter from Mars, right away calling back to like these 1950s sci-fi movies. I think that would be a really cool in to saying, hey, this DC universe that we're putting up on the big screen has a past, and there are very cool things that happened back then. And eventually you could even spin, a Justice Society movie into that very, very easily.
Listen, man, I'm always here for it. I think shape-shifting characters are some of my favorites in all of storytelling. I mean, you can go back to like the folkloric shapeshifters, the Lokis, and even the indigenous Native American stories of the tricksters. I think it's always a fascinating storytelling device. I mean, Mystique, when done right, not X-Men films where they're just, what if we made her naked? Like, God, Jesus. But anyways, I think Mystique is one of the most fascinating characters in all of comics. Her inspirations. I immediately fell in love with John Jones in the Justice League animated series, Justice League Unlimited. Immediate favorite. I think it's such a smart storytelling device. I absolutely love it, and I'm here for John Jones. That was probably my favorite thing about the Snyder Cut was his inclusion, and so I really, really want to see him represented well.
I totally agree, and I think this kind of thing would do a fantastic job of establishing who he is, and then we can have a lot of fun with him when he gets into the Justice League. Which brings us to your next movie, and oh boy, there's a lot to unpack here, my friend. Let's go.
Listen, like I said, I'm just coming with vibes. One of the few things that I've read independently is Green Lanterns with Simon Baz and my beloved Jessica Cruz. I love Kyle Rayner too. I love Guy Gardner, Jon Stewart. I love the Green Lanterns. And, we tried to fix the Ryan Reynolds debacle of a film. It's been dragged through the mud and poked fun at for over a decade. But at some point, we're going to have to divorce ourselves from that film and move forward. Because Green Lantern, even in my limited exposure and limited knowledge of DC, it's essential to it. You have to have Green Lantern or the Green Lantern Corps well represented, and so I'm and one of the things that was wrong about the Ryan Reynolds film is, Oa and the Guardians. It was just a blip scene. Like my favorite scene of that movie is when you had Kilowog in the training montage, but that was like less than 10 minutes of the film. So I think you got to lean into that. If you give me a full-fledged Green Lantern Corps where you get to see all the different lanterns well represented, I would love for some practical effects rather than relying heavily on CGI. But I want
especially
the
for the
Green.
suit.
Yeah, I want the Green Lanterns well represented, man. I'm dying for it. The HBO Max series that they keep teasing, then taking away, then giving back. I'm desperate for it.
I'm not sure where to start with this. I think there's such a massive lore behind Green Lantern, and we've always had so many Earth-bound Green Lanterns, and a series of successions, and then those characters stuck around, and then we added some more. And there's supposed to be one Earth Green Lantern, and even that they're even now commenting on that in the comic book sometimes. Like, why do we have so many Earth Green Lanterns suddenly? There's Hal Jordan, there's Kyle Rayner, there's John Stewart, there's Guy Gardner. We have Simon Baz, we have Jessica Cruz, and now, of course, the beloved, the star of Far Sector, I Love You So, Joe Mullen. There's so many Earth Green Lanterns. You cannot easily make a movie that has 8 Earth Green Lantern leads, and then lean into that as a single movie. Some kind of building has to happen here. On the flip side, though, and this is not going to be a popular take, I don't think we should start with Hal Jordan. I think Hal Jordan on the big screen has been tainted right now.
No thanks. Hell, in the comics, we don't really need him in the comics.
There's going to be a lot of Hal Jordan fans really mad at us for that. But I'm not saying that Hal Jordan can never appear.
All eight of them are going to be mad at us.
I don't think that we necessarily have to say that Hal Jordan will never appear or that he never existed. I think it's fair to say that Hal Jordan existed and is missing in action, and his ring is picking a successor, whatever. A lot of people are going to say the natural place to go is John Stewart. And I think that is a natural place to go. However, I don't think it is the only natural place to go. I think that we need to maybe take a chance of establishing multiple Green Lanterns. It would, for example, be interesting to have John Stewart as a experienced Green Lantern, and let's say a Kyle Rayner, for example, gets Hal Jordan's ring after Hal Jordan goes MIA, and then Stewart has to train Rayner. That might be interesting, right? And then you have the experienced ring slinger, and you have the entry level character that is sort of the audience surrogate that allows us to see all this. And we can have a lot of these other Green Lanterns popping up as secondary characters to that story. You can have Guy Gardner pop up and make fun of Kyle Rayner's, inexperience. You can have a Joe Mullen popping up and saying, well, she's heading out because she's the one that always goes like to the furthest reaches and has these long duties where she's gone for a while, and you can even spin that off into a Far Sector movie eventually, right, if you want. But I think what we need to establish is A, Hal Jordan was around, but he is not around right now. B, we pick one of the Earth Green Lanterns, that's the newbie, and one of the Earth Green Lanterns, that's the experienced person. We create a relationship there that allows us to explore the Green Lantern Corps, and the entire movie takes place in space. We leave Earth and we don't come back, unlike the last Green Lantern movie, which was 2 seconds on Oa and right back to Earth. We have all sorts of heroes on Earth, but this is basically the Guardians of the Galaxy of the DC universe. It is, you're out there in the wild reaches of space and seeing all this crazy DC universe space crap. And that's what Green Lantern Corps should be all about. I think that would be the easiest in for the franchise, and it would be very, very different from what we've seen before. And then you have your choice of picking which Green Lantern you want to include in Justice League, because you've established several, and you have, the pick of the litter. And you can justify anybody. Oh, I'm just the one who's currently on the Earth rotation, right? We all rotate through duties on Earth, and I'm currently the one on Earth rotation. The other people are out in space right now, then you have the creative freedom for whoever makes a Justice League movie to pick whatever Green Lantern they want to put on the Justice League.
Okay, but then all I love the idea of like Training Day, but like John's not evil at the end.
Yeah.
But phase 2, then I want my buddy cop, Simon and Jessica, because like I just love that. Like they can't stand each other, but then like they're best friends. They eat pancakes. Like give me that. That's the phase 2 film.
And see, that's the thing too. Like, you don't even have to always have the same leads for Green Lantern Corps movies because there's so many fascinating characters in the franchise. You can take these characters and you can put them to rest for a movie and then go over here and do these characters a little bit. You can do a Far Sector movie, you know? You can do, well, this Green Lantern is going to be in the Justice League movie, so now the next Green Lantern Corps movie is going to focus on these characters. Like, that is a very possible thing to do with Green Lantern movies, I think.
All right, Dave, now on to a character that I'm increasingly ambivalent about, especially since the advent of a character or an actor that shall not be named.
Well, let me change that for you, because I'm going to go ahead and unequivocally say, and this is also going to make a certain segment of the fandom mad, Barry Allen needs to be put to rest for a while. I think the character has now starred in 8 seasons of a CW show. He's got a movie coming out on the big screen, which may or may not do well. And regardless of whether it does well or not, I think it's fair to say that given a certain actor's recent proclivities, that Warner's probably not going to want to continue with that actor and that interpretation of the character. So I propose that we go to the Wally West well. I think it's time for Wally to be the Flash on the big screen. And that is easy for me to say because Wally West is my Flash. I missed most of the Barry Allen golden age, right? I'm a post-Crisis on Infinite Earths kid. So my Flash growing up was always Wally West. And so I think it's a natural place because the Flash, I would say even more than any other character in DC, is a character built on the notion of legacy. There's Jay Garrick, right? There's Barry Allen. Then there's Wally West. There's a straight through line of the Flash mantle being passed along from generation to generation. You can say that there was a Barry Allen. You can say that Barry Allen died in action or whatever, and that Wally West was his sidekick, and that now that Barry is gone, he has to sort of step up and become the next Flash. And you're dealing with notions of legacy. You can even have a Barry Allen in some flashbacks. You don't even have to be really specific, because we're talking about Speed Force stuff. You can have his face blurry, or you can only see him from the back because you're seeing him from the perspective of Wally, who's kind of always chasing Barry. It's very symbolic, right? He's trying to live up to his legacy now. So you can be very sort of non-specific about Barry. And at the same time, you have, a history there, and you have a Wally who's trying to live up to that. And there's a really good comic book storyline written by Mark Waid from way back when called Born to Run. And I think that is a perfect subtitle for a Flash movie. The Flash, Born to Run. I mean, how does it get better than that, right? You have Born to Run was sort of a history of Wally West. It does a lot of like, here's how he got his powers, sort of like Wally West Year One. Here's how he, was trained by Barry Allen, and then here's how he became the Flash. And you can use this as a jumping off point and kind of seed some of those things into flashbacks, right? This doesn't have to be an origin story movie, but it can be part of the inspiration of a movie. And you have a sort of a present day through line of Wally becoming the Flash and having to take on his first major, supervillain. Maybe we just do like the Rogues. I love the Rogues. I think it's so sad that we always have to go to like Reverse Flash every stinking time. It always has to be a speedster. I absolutely love the Rogues combined. They always have been a really cool challenge for the Flash. And you have Wally West trying to, come into his own and become his own Flash, living up to Barry Allen's legacy, but at the same time also trying to, carve out his own space as the Flash, as a Flash who's his own man and very different even from Barry Allen in a lot of ways. So let's go ahead and put Barry Allen to rest. We can say he existed. You can always even like do a return storyline eventually if the movies are successful. There are all sorts of ways to go, but I think the starting point, so we can put Barry Allen to rest for a while and show something new and different in a Flash movie, is that we go to Wally West.
Oh boy, yeah. So I don't know what it is. It's just maybe it's even the power set. Speedsters have never really done it for me. I watched the first couple of seasons of the Flash. It was interesting, mostly because Candace Patton is super hot. But
this is true.
The only time that I've really kind of clicked with the Flash is broken record, the Justice League animated series, like Michael Rosenbaum, who's no stranger to DC characters, really got me with the one-liners and the snark. So that was fun. So the times
And that's Wally West.
and I have enjoyed in doing my Dick Grayson deep dive, him showing up in Dick's comics. So that's been fun. But I'm willing to be open-minded about this and to be won over because I've been buried to death.
And I think that is right there my point. I think we've all been buried to death. I think eight seasons of Run Barry Run on the CW, and now we're getting a Barry Allen movie. I think it's fair to lean into the notion of legacy a little bit and let a different Flash shine on the big screen, and maybe make that successful. And then you can always bring back Barry at some point. I mean, he came back in the comic books too, and do a version of Barry Allen. But just much like Hal Jordan, I think the character's been tainted at this point when it comes to general audiences, and we just need something different. Why go, see this Flash movie on the big screen when you just watch 8 years of Flash episodes on the CW and you're just getting the same thing in a slightly different packaging? Like, let's make it worth the audience's time and do something completely different. All right, Kris, that brings us to that brings us to something we're going to wholeheartedly agree on.
Listen, this is just, I'm in my Dick Grayson era, guys. You're going to have to bear with me because the lasting legacy of me, I just finished up playing Gotham Knights. Wonderful game. I have a few nitpicks, but all in all, very, very, very much worth the price of admission. Love that game. And so I'm completely obsessed with Dick Grayson now. And I want a Dick movie. I want the Batman and the Robin. I want Robin on the freaking big screen. And all due respect to Chris O'Donnell, he was doing the best. But it was not the greatest iteration of Robin we've ever seen. All right. So I really want a sequel to the Batman. I'm not sure of the villain that I want. I think it's wide open. There's such a great rogues gallery that you could do so many different directions. You could go Victor Freeze. You could go anywhere but the Joker. I swear to God, if we get the Joker again, I'm gonna riot and I'll burn the whole thing to the ground. Please, no more Joker. Okay? Can we also just cancel the Folie à Deux? Like, I'm good. We don't need any more Joker. Okay? So any villain but the Joker in the Batman and the Robin, or you can change it, whatever. I want Dick Grayson represented. Make him younger. I'm not sure the fan cast. More on that in a future episode, maybe. But I'd love to see that Pattinson universe. I also need a shitload more of Andy Serkis. That man is like flexing on all of our favorite properties. He was incredible in Black Panther. He was incredible in Andor, so Star Wars, and he was incredible in The Batman. The only nitpick that I have is we didn't get near enough of him. I love Andy Serkis, man. So I'm super excited for the Batman sequel, and I just hope we finally get Robin, not that Joseph Gordon-Levitt nonsense we got in The Dark Knight Rises, because whatever the crap that was.
May I present to you the perfect basis for such a movie? Because I too want Robin on the big screen rather desperately. And I understand there's some trepidation about putting, Batman with a 9 or 10-year-old as a sidekick, with people aiming guns at them and shooting at them. I don't think Robin necessarily needs to be that young. He does need to be under 18, but like a 15-year-old Robin, I think would be perfectly fine for something like this. You don't have to go right away 8 years old or something. But I want a Robin on the big screen. I think Robin is essential to the Batman mythos. I think there is a reason that Robin was there from the get-go in the Batman TV show back in the 60s. And yes, I know that thing was campy as crap by design. But look, Batman and Robin is such a phrase. It's like peanut butter and jelly. Like, the two things go together. And yet, in modern iterations, we always shy away from a Robin. And I think you can very easily write a story that makes an argument for there being a Robin. Not just because it deals with Bruce Wayne's loneliness and for him wanting to maybe, save this kid and prevent him from becoming like him, which if you know Nightwing in the comics, Bruce succeeded. Like, Dick is not Batman. He's a very different kind of guy. He's much more lighthearted. He's not completely, obsessed and consumed by his obsessions, right? So obviously Bruce did something right in raising this kid. But I think you can make a very easy argument for saying, look, this kid is going to go out there and is going to try to do this one way or another, but at least if I train him, he has a chance of surviving, Like, this kid is out for it, and I have to temper him, or he's going to get himself killed. So I think you can make an argument for a Robin, even in a movie. But I think the place to go here is, I'm sorry to say, Kris, it's Jeff Loeb. And I know we have our issues with Jeff these days. But if you flash back into the late 90s, you and I both know that Jeff Loeb wrote one of the most definite Batman stories that continues to be used as inspirations for movies from, Batman Begins all the way to The Batman, and that's The Long Halloween. There is a sequel to The Long Halloween. It's called Dark Victory. It's once again with Tim Sale. It's 14 issues. It's very, very cool in that it centers on a series of murders involving Gotham City police officers by a killer known as the Hangman. And you have this Hangman storyline, which is the underlying mystery, which is something that Matt Reeves really likes to lean into, is, investigating and stuff. There is a very cool thing going on that's sort of a sequel to the whole Falcone mob falling apart, which is perfect because we had, Falcone in The Batman. So here you have Two-Face trying to sort of mop up the rest of Falcone's territory and become sort of the new crime boss of Gotham City. So you can have some fun with Two-Face here as a villain. And it is the origin of Robin. So Dick Grayson is a character in Dark Victory, and I think Dark Victory handles that extremely well. So I think using Dark Victory as sort of a inspiration and even a subtitle, I think The Batman Dark Victory sounds really cool, right? You can have something that is in the tone of Matt Reeves' The Batman, and also at the same time brings in and establishes Dick Grayson Robin. So I think we have something here by looking at Dark Victory. And if you've not read Dark Victory, this is Loeb before he lost his mind. It's very, very good.
There's no cannibalism involved, right?
No. The Blob does not eat the wasp in this one, believe it or not.
All right, so I know exactly what I'm doing after we hit the stop button because I'm desperate for it. This is how desperate I am, y'all. I'm giving Titans a 6th attempt. That's how desperate I am.
Just don't do it, man. Just don't do it. The casting is so good and the writing is so bad.
I'm in. I'm over halfway through season 1. I might as well.
Oh my god! The casting is so good and the writing is so bad.
It's so good. I'm just looking for glimmers, the golden flakes in the turds, because I mean, Anna Diop. I mean, I'm on a bender today. Like, it's a constant theme. She's so great. Anna Diop is so great, and the dialogue, it's so bad. And here's the thing about why we need Robin on the big screen. It's actually perfectly fleshed out in Titans. Jason Todd is a compelling character only when he's juxtaposed against others around him. The problem that I have mostly with Titans is everybody is Jason Todd in this thing. Like, Dick Grayson is so hilariously misunderstood by the writing staff on this. Like, they made him Jason Todd. Jason Todd shows up and we're like, what's the difference? And so that's why we need Robin on the big screen. We just have Batman sulking by himself, and it was great in The Batman. It was fine for the first film, but I don't want it to go down the road that the Nolan franchise did. You have to have a juxtaposition. You have to give Batman something to play off of, and it's such a great wellspring of content, and it needs to be done. So
and the way they left the Batman too is, that he realizes that he can't be out for vengeance, that he has to stand for more, that he has to be, a symbol of hope for people to some extent too, right? And that is a great place to then go and say, here's this kid who went through something like I did. I have to save this kid. It's a natural evolution for where the first movie left off, I think.
And you can easily make that, like you were talking about having an underage kid under his care and putting him in harm's way. You could easily make that like he's a rebellious teenager and Bruce tells him he can't do this and he forbids it. And being the rebellious teenager that he is, he goes and does it anyway because he believes it's the right thing. And then Bruce bequeaths and relents after much debate, much hullabaloo. And then he's like, well, if you're going to do this, you're going to do it under my supervision, under my care, with my training and all of that stuff.
Exactly. I think that works perfectly for what you're trying to do, and it's perfectly realistic.
All right, Dave, so you teased it before, but what is this all leading up to?
So if we're going to go ahead and we're going to establish these Green Lanterns, and we're going to reestablish Superman, and we have our Batman, and we're going to play around with the Wonder Woman mythos a little bit, and we're going to pass the mantle along to a new Flash, and we got the Martian Manhunter back in the past investigating some alien incursion in the 50s. What is this all leading to? The only logical place it can lead when you're asking me, and that is a Justice League story written by Grant Morrison. Boom. There it is. We all, have seen what happens when you put the cart before the horse, and when, you have people going directly to the well of the new gods and dark side, right? And I don't think it necessarily worked really well because there wasn't a lot of build to that. So how do you establish the Justice League here? How do you bring these people together? Very simple. Grant Morrison and Howard Porter, when they relaunched JLA back in the day, they did a storyline that did not rely on any, major quote unquote established famous villains. There was no Starro the Conqueror to start out with, right? You didn't have Darkseid in issue 1. No, what you had is you had an alien superhero team landing on Earth and saying that they're going to fix the planet. Only some really fishy stuff is going on with them. And although they're running around and doing stuff like growing food in the desert and stuff, and the public loves them, everybody's very clear that there's something fishy going on. Batman investigates, Martian Manhunter is looking into stuff. Everybody's kind of like pulling in the same direction, trying to figure out what's going on, which is a great, great way of getting these characters together for the very first time on the big screen. And then we can beautifully tie this back to, Manhunter from Mars, which is that, he found evidence in the 50s that there are some shape-shifting aliens running around Earth like him, but how is that possible if all the Martians are gone? And what do we get? All these quote-unquote alien superheroes are actually Martians. They're white Martians, right? The people who killed Martian Manhunter's family. And so the Justice League has to pool together and defeat these white Martians who are, using their shape-shifting powers to imitate powers of like the Justice League. So you have a guy who's like powerful like Superman. You have a guy who runs fast like the Flash, And so you have these people facing off with each other with like dark mirrored versions of themselves almost. And each hero gets to kind of prove why they are who they are. They're better than the imitators, right? They're the OGs. They're the originals. They're what we like to call in DC sometimes the Big Seven, right? And so I think that is the perfect jumping off point for a Justice League movie. Go ahead and put the new gods and Darkseid over here. You can always adapt that later. You don't want to come right away with something that complex as the new gods. That's like Thanos level stuff right there. You need to establish that. You need to, play with that in the background for a few movies and build to it, But, having the White Martians as the villains for the first Justice League movie, and the reason that they all get together, that's where it's at. Let's go ahead and go to Morrison for some inspiration. It's also something that people wouldn't expect. It's something a little different. You're not going right away with the biggest name you can pull out of a hat, Instead, you do the Avengers thing. The Avengers did the whole Chitauri invasion there under Loki. It's not exactly the biggest enemies that you're going to go straight for in an Avengers story, but it works for that movie overall. And so I think, going with the White Martians would work really well for this new cinematic universe, Chris.
Oh my God. I feel like I'm almost tearing up. This is one I've actually read. I feel so special. Yeah, I remember.
And it's good, isn't it?
It's so great. It's so great. Oh man, I think this is a great. It's a great bait and switch because then you have immediate controversy because they're like they're doing this to help people. How could you do this, Justice League, whatever? So that has like some built-in like conflict for the heroes. So yeah, I love what I've read of Morrison Porter of JLA, and I need to dive back in now that I've got this Ultra subscription. That's the other lasting effect of Gotham Knights. I loved it so much I bought the Ultra subscription to DC Universe Infinite.
Yeah, I'm on Ultra as well, and I'm loving it, man. You know, it's funny too because you can have Green Lantern standing there in the story and being like, "Dude, my ring doesn't recognize these guys. Like my ring knows pretty much anything in the universe. Who the heck are these aliens? I can't even identify their race. What in the world is going on?" Right? So you're establishing this beautiful mystery right away, and then you have Pattinson's Batman, who is all about the mysteries, right? Who gets to do his investigative stuff and try to infiltrate, and it's just there's so much fun to be had with this particular story and adapting it for the big screen, I think, and a wonderful tie back to Martian Manhunter and why he's here to begin with, and we're dealing with his past, and it's just there's a lot of a lot of feels there for him too, because he's dealing with an enemy he thought that had been vanquished, and they killed his family, and he has to deal with all those emotions. There's so much good stuff here.
Yeah, and I think I've complained about this before, but I think one of my greatest frustrations with so many things of content where we're overflooded is a lot of people don't have any patience. And I think something that Avengers did with, a character like Loki being the main protagonist with an interchangeable army like the Chitauri is you had to wait and be patient. We don't need to rush into Darkseid, because if you rush into Darkseid and these big name villains, it's not going to be as satisfying. And then what do you do to top that?
Exactly. I mean, that's a problem, right? And I also think, there's a general tendency of acting like Darkseid is somehow the be-all, end-all Justice League villain because he's so powerful. But to me, he is not the essential Justice League villain. In a lot of ways, Darkseid and the New Gods and all that were primarily established in like the Superman books, so I know he's been conflagrated there. He's kind of like put out there as like this is the ultimate Justice League villain. To me, there's so many more interesting Justice League villains. Starro the Conqueror is a more interesting Justice League villain to me than Darkseid, if you ask me. There's more.
You and that damn starfish.
Dude, I tell you, like some of the coolest Justice League stories are like Starro the Conqueror is taking over the world, and how do you like imagine a story where you have every member of the Justice League with one of those Starro things on their face and they've been taken over, and the last man standing is Batman. How is Batman going to save the world when all his more powerful teammates have been Starroed? There's a movie there, Big guy comes from New Genesis and Superman has to punch him around is not nearly as fun as something where you get to go to the essence of the character, right? What Darkseid has going for him is very, very powerful, and he's a dictator. Boom. That's all you got there. Not that he's a bad character or something. I just think when it comes to the Justice League, you can have more fun with the key than you can have fun with Darkseid. But maybe that's just me. I like some variety in my storytelling.
Before we wrap up here, this is me again saying, put Brainiac as the main villain in a film. Damn it. That's all I want. I want Brainiac. Injustice 2 is one of the most ridiculously well thought out storylines for a video game. Literally just make that a movie. It's so perfectly done.
I have my issues with Injustice just because of the comic books. They're really rough for me to survive.
I haven't read a single one.
Oh, evil Superman all day, every day is not good for my soul. I love Superman too much for that.
All right, that wraps up our Byword Big Talk. What movies did we miss in Phase 1? What ones would you include? And what should we do in Phase 2? Sound off on social media at NerdByword on Twitter and Instagram, or individually, that Nerd Dave and that Nerd Kris. But when we come back from our final break, Nerd Commendations rise again. We are back for the fan favorite segment where we tell you all the good stuff. You know it as Dave, you're incredibly reductive in this title.
Yeah, what can I say? Hey, I'm reading indie comics again. Only this time I went to the well of a fairly well-known writer and a fairly well-known artist, but it is a creator-owned independent. So here I am. Let's talk about Powers for a second, which is written by Brian Michael Bendis and illustrated by Michael Avon Oeming. And let's be honest here, this sucker's been all over the place. I can't even tell you where it was published because it was published by Image, then it was published by Marvel under Icon, then it was published at DC for a little while under Jinx World, and now Jinx World, the imprint moved over to Dark Horse, I think. Which means that now they're like reprinting everything from the beginning. I think the first volume was just reprinted, the first trade paperback, so it's hitting the market all over again. Time to, talk about this thing since it's hitting the market all over again. Everything's going to become available slowly again. Definitely worth reading. I finally was able to finish this sucker, and I have to say, this is good. So Powers, pretty mature reader level stuff. A lot of sex, a lot of violence. I mean, it's very much of that ilk. But Powers is set in a world where superpowers are pretty common. There's a lot of superheroes running around, and there are two detectives, Christian Walker and Dina Pilgrim, who are police officers in the Chicago Homicide Department, but they in a specific department that deals only with cases that involve powers, namely people with superpowers. That's what they're referred to here, not metahumans or anything like that. They're just referred to as powers. Walker is actually a former superhero who lost his powers, and when he lost his powers, decided to become a police officer. The first arc is called Who Killed Retro Girl, and it involves Walker having to investigate the death of a former teammate of his, and he is assigned a new partner in Dina Pilgrim, who is not exactly what I would call quote-unquote stable. And for those listeners who have read the entire series, that may be an understatement. Dina Pilgrim is messed up, but a very, very cool character. And so they have to try to investigate who killed Retro Girl. As the series progresses, you get more and more lore associated with, Walker and who he was in the past, and that might be surprising in a lot of ways. There's a lot more history there than people initially might suspect. Superheroes come and go, die, and are replaced by legacies, and finally, you kind of come to the point where you realize that Walker, in particular, has a long-running let's say, antagonist that in the final storyline he's going to have to face off with one more time and stop him from ending the world, even though he doesn't have superpowers anymore. So there's cop procedural there, but there's also some really cool world building going on. There's a lot of lore associated with this. I have to say the art on here reminds me of a more fluid, a more stylized, almost more jagged version of like something like what we see in like Batman the Animated Series or something. It's very, very cool and very distinctive. The storytelling is really good. You can kind of see how, especially in the early goings, how Bendis kind of cut his teeth with this one, and how his storytelling sort of evolved before it kind of rolled into something like, Ultimate Spider-Man. I actually think, once you sit down and read like the breadth of all of Powers, I think it's probably some of Bendis's best stuff. It stands right up there with his Ultimate Spider-Man run, I think, as just really, really good, although very different. And I've been a guy who's been critical of Bendis, particularly some of the stuff that he did once he moved over to DC Comics. I wasn't a huge fan of his Superman run, for example. But I think that Powers is just a really fine creator-owned run. I'm a big fan of this. I enjoyed it tremendously. And although it's complete now, I don't know if they're ever going to like go back and try to make more stories in this universe or not. But the story as it stands is complete, and it's totally worth a read.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by this. I've never heard of it before, so I'm definitely gonna be checking this one out because it has a lot of the elements that I enjoy in storytelling. I totally agree. Just looking at it with the Batman the Animated Series comparison, but I'm definitely gonna have to check this one out.
Yeah, it's very cool. And there was that very short-lived television adaptation back when PlayStation tried to have like a PlayStation TV network or something, and they actually picked and they actually picked this up and made a TV show out of it, which didn't stick, But it's sad because a good adaptation of this, I think it would be it has sort of a natural built-in serialized sort of TV show thing going on where you have the procedural cases, but you also have the lore behind, Walker and who he is and what he did in the past. I think it lends itself to that kind of adaptation much more than something like a feature film, I think. And I would love a good adaptation of something like this. But yeah, I mean, Powers, read it. It's really, really good. Chris, I'm not sure, man. Come at me. Should I really do this to myself? I don't know. Why is it good? Tell me.
Listen, I treated myself early to a holiday gift, but Marvel's Midnight Suns is a tactical RPG that was recently released by Firaxis Games and Marvel. And it is truly a unique game in every sense of the word. There's elements of like The Sims. You have to build relationships with your characters, and once you have to go like hang out with the different characters. Um, you have to increase your friendship, do nice things for them, and as you increase the relationship with them, then you unlock abilities for those characters and team up bonuses between your hunter created your created character hunter um and them as like a team up bonus. The gameplay is completely unique. It's card based and it's a turn based RPG. It is incredibly unique, and I really enjoy it. It's really really wild. I mean, it's like the dark magic stuff. So basically, here's the long story short. Dr. Faustus of Hydra uses dark magic and science to raise Lilith from her eternal slumber in the belief that her power will enable Hydra to conquer the world. Within the following months, a star known as the Midnight Sun begins approaching Earth and destabilizes magic, heralding the return of Lilith's master, the elder god Chthon. So it's just like a really, really cool game. You get to play as an Xbox gamer. I get to finally play a video game with Spider-Man in it. Yuri Lowenthal from the PlayStation games returns as a voice actor. Lyrica Okano returns to voice Nico Minoru from the Runaways film series or television show. Blade is in it. He's a great character. He's really fun. The writing on this is snappy. It's funny. I love Robbie Reyes as the Ghost Rider. And for me alone, the ability to I've chronicled my health issues and my, the reasons that turn-based RPG are essential to me and a welcome change from typical video games. The gameplay alone and the reliance on relationship building between characters is something I've never seen in a video game before. So I'm still at the early stages of this game, but I'm massively enjoying this.
I like RPGs, but I'm going to freely admit that one of my great blind spots has always been tactical RPGs. I don't know why. Tactical RPGs never quite meshed so well with me. It seems weird, especially considering I like, turn-based strategy games like Civilization, but for some reason, tactical RPGs never quite captivated me. But I think you might have sold me on this one. I might have to get Midnight Suns a try.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can, go ahead and get the season pass. It's a bit pricey, but there are future characters to come unlocked. Storm is going to be there. Scarlet Witch. I'm really really excited about the future of this game. Morbius, Venom, Deadpool, upcoming season pass characters. So the roster in and of itself is fun. The writing on this game is one of the biggest pleasant surprises as well. But I'm massively enjoying it.
Did you say Morbius? Is it Morbin time?
Oh, it might be. Well, whenever that character releases on the season pass.
All right, well, I'm here for it. I'm going to have to check this one out, man.
That wraps up another episode of the Nerd Byword podcast. We thank you so much for listening and playing along with us. If you like what you hear, please head to your favorite podcasting platform. Follow, subscribe, rate, review. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio. You name it, we're there. Even our fancy website, nerdbyword.com.
And how would you go about setting up a new DC Cinematic Universe? Why don't you hit us up on social media? You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at NerdByWord, and individually at @NerdKris and at @NerdDave. As of this recording, Hive is not back up yet, but both Kris and I have, I think, set up a shop on Hive as well. And you can find me @NerdDave at on the Mastodon art server as well. I'm hanging out over there because I just love hanging out with artists. That's just one of my big things. I just love artists. They're so awesome.
And you can hit up the link in our social media bios for our Discord server, so you can come hang with us. You can also find our TeePublic and Redbubble shops there for some cool merch. And as always, stay well and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Kris and Dave, two nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez with additional drops composed by Joe Biondi. Our show art is by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.